I'm delighted to welcome you to the annual Jonathan Lax Conference on Entrepreneurship and extend a very special welcome to Terrence Hicks, class of 1973, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to begin by thanking the alumni and parents who will be presenting at sessions this afternoon. You've given of your time and your talents to come and work with our students and our alumni and other people who are attending the conference, and we really appreciate it. I also want to thank the judges for the slot tank that will happen later on this afternoon. We appreciate your work and effort as well. I want to acknowledge the Lax family and their continuing strong support of this conference and entrepreneurship at Swarthmore. It is a tradition at Swarthmore and the Board of Managers in the community that when one of our community members passes away, we recognize them in a moment of silence. Frances Lax died in January. She was a staunch supporter of this conference. Not only did her son Jonathan attend Swarthmore, but Gary, who graduated in '74, and Andy, who graduated in '77, and Charles, who didn't come to Swarthmore but has also often visited this conference. I'd like to ask us just to, in silence, remember Frances. Thank you. Jonathan Lax, class of 1971, began his highly successful entrepreneurship career while he was a student here at Swarthmore. He founded a private mutual fund which invested solely in non-defense related securities. At his death in 1996, Jonathan bequeathed funding for this conference, designed in his mind to motivate and guide Swarthmore students to put their intellectual and ethical skills at work in the entrepreneurial world. Since Jonathan's time, we've continued this conference and expanded our own institutional interest in and support for entrepreneurship and students exploring careers in entrepreneurship. Out of the college's most recent strategic planning process was the decision to start a Center for Innovation and Leadership, to create a space in which students can hone their skills in entrepreneurship, explore what it means to be leaders in this global world, and also connect with alumni and parents who are entrepreneurs. The Lax Conference is a valuable resource in helping the center expand its mission and vision, but also grounding it in a long tradition of entrepreneurship at Swarthmore. Of course, this year, we kick off at this conference a brand new event, the SWAT Tank, a showcase for student entrepreneurs, and I think we'll all be excited as this first group of students make their pitches. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to take a moment just to introduce three of the members of our Board of Managers who are with us this afternoon. Ask them to stand. If you have any complaints, talk to them. Robert Shapiro, class of '78. Joe Turner, class of '73. Joe will be one of the judges of the slot tank. And Bill Kemp, class of '72. Bill is the chair of our board, and there's Louis Lazarus. Louis, I didn't see you come in. It's with great pleasure I want to introduce our keynote speaker. Terrence Hicks, class of 1973, is Vice President of the Investment Group for Ben Franklin Technology Partners, where he's worked since 1993. He's responsible for all of Ben Franklin's investment activities, which includes a portfolio of over 120 early and emerging stage technology companies, one of the largest such portfolios in this country. Terry joined Ben Franklin in 1993 after 20 years of experience in small business lending and corporate treasury activities with Fidelity Bank, now Wells Fargo, and Sun Company. He previously served as Vice President of Sun Company's specialized small business investment company. In addition to managing Ben Franklin's investment activity for over 10 years, he also co-founded Minority Angel Investor Network, the nation's only organized angel group investing in high-growth, minority-owned or led companies. Terry earned a BA in economics from Swarthmore and an MBA in finance from LaSalle University. Go LaSalle. LaSalle's the basketball team. Terry has been instrumental as we have worked to support our community interested in entrepreneurship. Last summer, Terry worked closely with Career Services to form a partnership in which current students participated in a summer internship with one of many innovative startup companies within the portfolio of Ben Franklin Technology Partners. Student interns were given a summer stipend that was funded by the generosity of an alumnus. Due to the overall success of this partnership, Terry and Career Services will be offering internships to students again for the summer of 2013. Please welcome Terry to the podium.
Hello, Swarthmore. Hello, Swarthmore. I can't believe it's been 40 years. I can't believe it's been 40 years. I am delighted to be here today. I really have looked forward to this. When I was invited to do this many months ago, I said, wow, this is really an opportunity to come back to campus. I'm somewhat embarrassed because I live in Philly, and I really haven't been out here very often. Many of these buildings I have never seen, including the one that we're in right now. But in any event, I'm very delighted to be here, and I hope that we can have a nice interactive conversation this afternoon. So it's certainly a pleasure to be here. I want to talk this afternoon, and I want to talk with you as opposed to talking at you. So I want this to be interactive about something that's very near and dear to me, and that's the topic of entrepreneurship. But specifically around entrepreneurship, the topic of change. I oversee a portfolio of 120 companies. And if that sounds like a daunting number of companies, yes, it is. It makes for a very, very interesting day. But as me and my team talk about the challenges that these companies have from day to day, it's very clear that change is part of the entrepreneur's DNA. If the entrepreneur isn't willing to change, the entrepreneur will wither on the vine and die. So we daily, in talking about the status of the companies in our portfolio, are really talking about change. We're talking about their adaptation to customer taste, their adaptation to changes in the economy. So they're constantly changing. So as we talk about change, I was thinking about a quote, and there's something that we kind of have as a motto at Ben Franklin, and it's very simple, it's very elegant, but it basically tells the story of what I want to talk about today. And it's coined by Ben Franklin. We know a lot about him in our office. And it says, basically, when you're finished changing, you're finished. And for the entrepreneur, that's true. If you're finished, if you're not changing and reacting to what's out there, then basically you're finished. Okay, so we find that very appropriate. This just happens to be a couple other quotes. When I was asked to do this, I said, well, let me go start finding some quotes that I thought might be relevant to our conversation today. And actually, the top one, change is part of the entrepreneur's DNA. I don't know who to attribute that to. It might even have been myself. I don't know. And the other one, in a way, entrepreneurship is managing the unpredictable. So change is inevitable. So again, we're talking change. Wow. Slid this one into the deck. Wow, my goodness, okay. That's me 40 years ago. 1973. And I think I have just walked out of the amphitheater. Looks like I'm holding my diploma. So I'm big stuff now. I graduated from Swarthmore College. I have a BA in economics. I'm dying to get this mortarboard off of my head, because some of you might remember back in the 70s, these African American guys had these huge afterwards. Mine was about 12 inches long. My wife knows because she used to have to flat it. So in order to get that hat on my head, we literally had to use, what do you call them, bobby pins? To kind of stick the thing on. So I was very anxious at that point to get this thing off my head. And also, you can notice that the knot in the tie was about this big. It was fashionable at the time, but I couldn't even get my collar into the rope there. But, so here I am, back in June of '73, and I'm saying to myself, well, what next? So I'm thinking, well, what next? What do most Swarthmore students do when they graduate? They go to graduate school, right? That's what you do. I mean, I was used to the all-nighters. I was used to writing the papers. So why not spend another 2 or 3 years doing that as opposed to getting a job? Well, I went home and I talked to my mother and shared that plan with her. She had been dutifully writing checks for the last 4 years for tuition and room and board. I had some scholarship assistance, but not a lot. So she had been writing these checks for 4 years. So I said, well, Mom, I want to do what my buddies are doing. They're going to law school. They're going to business school. They're essentially going to grad school, putting off getting a job for another 2 or 3 years. And she said, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. Go out and get a job. So that's what I did. That was one of my first major changes and adaptations. I had to go out and network and get a job. Now, back in the 70s, things were the economy was a little more user-friendly. So coming out of Swarthmore with a degree, large corporations were looking to grab you as quickly as possible. So there were a lot of programs, management training programs. All of the banks in Philadelphia had a management training program. So it's just a matter of picking which organization you wanted to work with. So I took a job at what was Fidelity Bank, Wells Fargo today. It was my first real job, job where I had to go into the office every day, put on a suit and tie. It was my first opportunity also to manage. I went through an 18-month training program and landed in retail banking, which meant that I was going to oversee and manage a branch office of the bank. And branch offices of banks usually have 2 types of activities. They have the operational activities where you're opening and closing bank accounts and safe deposit boxes and things of that sort. And then they have the other more fun part of the activity, and that is working with the neighboring small businesses in selling either lending products or other kinds of what then were credit card accounts. So I was, here again, 21-year-old kid, managing a staff of 20 individuals ranging in age from 35 to 65. 35 I thought was really old. 65 I figured was kind of prehistoric. But my assistant manager was the 65-year-old, and he said, look, Terry, I love managing in-office stuff. So I said, okay, fine, you do that. I'll go out and work with the entrepreneurs in the neighborhood and sell them the various bank products. So that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship. I thought these entrepreneurs were wonderful people. They had vision, they had passion, and excitement about what they were doing. So stayed around Fidelity Bank for 5 years doing that, then moved on to Alliance Enterprise Corporation, which was a small business investment company. That was a deeper dive into lending and investing, and national accounts, very diverse kinds of lending and investing activity. I was investing in fast food franchises. I was investing in cable TV projects. So I learned a lot about investing and the lending business. National scope, here again, I'm 25, 26 years old, traveling across the country, doing all kinds of wheeling and dealing, hands-on, a lot of fun. So, what did I conclude from all that? Well, I concluded that this is really what I want to do. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I can make a decent living, I can meet some really smart people, and being from Swarthmore, I can really make a difference. Okay? Now, my third job is the one that I hold now, and that is with Ben Franklin Technology Partners, and obviously I'll talk a little more about that. Now, let's move on. I want to talk about change in the context of entrepreneurship by focusing on two of my clients at Ben Franklin. One is a gentleman who has a company that has been around for over a decade. And another, the second company, is one that has been around for a shorter period of time. But they both have changes of a different type, and that's what I'd like to convey now. So, let's meet James Murdoch. James is kind of an interesting story because James attended Swarthmore, but he only attended Swarthmore for one semester. He took a semester off from Princeton, came to Swarthmore. I really have to talk to James and see what he was thinking. He took a semester off from Princeton, came to Swarthmore, only stayed for a semester, okay, and then went back to Princeton. So go figure. That's another conversation why he did that. But while he was here, he had a vision. Now the vision was to become an entrepreneur, and he wanted to build a prototype solar dryer. So he was never able to exercise or realize that vision while he was here on campus, but he came back in 1981. He received a grant from the Reagan administration, in fact one of the last grants to support solar energy. And he built this thing way off it might be in a crumb meadow, I'm not sure where. But this is James here, who's giving instructions. This is Fred Ortlieb, who I understand was in the engineering department at the time. But what happened while he built this thing, and I'm assuming it's not out there anymore, the price of oil fell. So when the price of oil fell, what do you think happened to solar energy? There's no longer any use for it. So the prospects for solar energy fell with it. Okay, so why do I bring this up? What's the connection with what we want to talk about today? Well, I meet James Murdoch years later. He starts a company called Endless Pools. You might be familiar with James's product. If you've ever been on an airplane and opened up the in-flight magazine, you see someone swimming in place in a pool, right? Okay, that's Endless Pools. The Endless Pools product. That's James Murdoch's product. So what he did, he introduced the swim-in-place pool with a motorized current. That was his first product. This was a small pool. It was motorized, so you could swim in place. The problem was, when he introduced the product, it was too expensive. So the market said, we like the concept, but it's too expensive. So what happened, it really kind of didn't work out for James. We meet James in 1990, and James at that time has a new concept. A concept he calls fast lane. And what fast lane is, it's a way to retrofit a motor onto an existing pool so that you can get the same concept of swimming in place by retrofitting an existing swimming pool. He says, there are a lot of pools out there. Why don't I just sell a mechanism that existing pool owners can hook onto their existing pool? Fine. Calls it fast lane. Comes to us. We give him some financing to do that. Well, this is a significant change. What he's done, he reacted to the his market, which was saying this is too expensive, we didn't like the former product. He reacted to it and created fast lane. Well, what happened? The idea really catches on. Endless Pools attracts a bunch of venture capital. So as far as James is concerned, life is really, really good. These are probably the images of James's product that you see in the in-flight magazines. Okay, James is doing very, very well now. I was talking to James a few days ago, actually a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this whole notion of change. And he gave me these two quotes. And I said, James, can I use these in my talk at Swarthmore? He said, yeah, sure. You had to think about it for a few minutes. And it says, it's something that drives my folks nuts here is they want so much to do things right and then enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done. The very idea that everything will change, and indeed must change, is deeply unsettling. And that was kind of interesting because he says, we're constantly changing, but my people are uncomfortable with this change. But he says our success is very much tied in with our ability to cope with this, and that this is change. Okay, so James then tells me, all right, what changes have I undergone over the last 10 plus years? Well, I've changed my management style. Back when I started the company, it was just me and a handful of others. I was very hands-on. I was very controlling at that time. So what I had to learn to do and adapt it to was letting go and sharing that responsibility with others. I had to change and adapt to new technologies. You know, I had to transition from direct to online advertising using things like Google AdWords, which I had never heard of when I started the company. My advertising, I went from 70% of my advertising in print down to 2% now. So you might not see too many more Endless Pools ads in the in-flight magazines because he's doing most of it online now. He says I have to now have the right people on the team that understand and can implement these new technologies. He says staying attuned to changes in customer tastes and needs. You know, I have to constantly do that. He's found that there's a recent focus on health benefits of a pool versus the luxury benefits of a pool. So he said he's focusing on that more now. And by doing that, it's led him to the development of new products. He has an underwater treadmill line, which he's introducing. And he's just constantly challenging the assumptions, continuously improving, continuously innovating to stay ahead. And he said this one to me, the pace of change is really unnerving, but something that we have to do out of necessity. So, what does today's Endless Pools look like? They have 2 factories in Pennsylvania. We love Pennsylvania investments. He has 135 employees. Revenues are a whole lot better than modest now. He has 1,500 units that he sells a year. He has 20,000 pools sold over that period of time. So James is doing quite well, as is Endless Pools. Okay, let me introduce you to another client of mine. This is Brad. Brad is your typical American guy. 1996. Brad is overweight, high cholesterol, low energy, he couldn't sleep, and he's 40 pounds overweight. Okay? So what he did, he moved back home. He was out of the area. He moved back home to Pennsylvania to kind of reevaluate his life. You know, he was kind of depressed about all this. So he came home to reevaluate his life. Went home to his mother, and he was introduced to a documentary film called Eating. I don't know if many of you have seen that documentary film, Eating. Have any of you seen it? Okay, Google it, take a look at it. One Friday night when you have absolutely nothing else to do, take a look at it. It's an interesting documentary. You'll probably give up eating after you. But you know, Brad watched it, and he found that there were benefits to a plant-based diet. So Brad became a convert. He said, this makes a lot of sense to me. So what he did, he adopted a strictly raw food diet, and what happened? He shed 40 pounds, his cholesterol was lowered, and he discovered new vigor and energy. So the problem was, he missed the crunch. Okay, these raw vegetables, he missed the crunch. So he started experimenting with raw chips from fresh vegetables. He dehydrated the chips, keeping the temperature below 115 degrees, and he ran some demos at the local farmers markets, and family and friends were really enthusiastic. They loved this product. They said the product has potential. So what Brad did, he leveraged his entrepreneurial experience. He had been an entrepreneur in the telecommunications industry, and he launches a company called Brad's Foods. Okay, local health food stores and Whole Foods markets began to carry the product. How many of you have bought any of Brad's products? More hands need to go up. I'm investing now. More hands need to go up. Find them. They're at Whole Foods. They're $7 a bag, but they're really great. Okay, we meet Brad and we invest in some early product development. So where has Brad changed? He had to adapt to the growth in product demand, because what's happening now, these bags of raw kale are literally flying off the shelves. If you go into a Whole Foods or a Wegmans, they really can't keep these things in stock. So he's gone from individual stores, selling to individual stores, to selling to distributors, moving pallets of product, and now moving semi-trailers of product. He had to change his management practices, because now there's a disconnect between his suppliers and distributors. He's having now to change to satisfy his product certifications, because he's gluten-free, he's organic, he's vegan, he's non-GMO, he's kosher. So he has to change to be in compliance with all of those. And he's introduced, because of that, a new ingredient in the nacho kale. You know, one of the certifications that disallowed one of the ingredients. So now he had to find another ingredient to put in his nacho kale. So Brad said, look, I'm constantly challenging the assumptions. I'm continuously improving and continuously innovating just to stay ahead. Using raw material. Now this was an interesting point. If you've ever had any of the product, what he basically sells, his biggest seller, is raw kale. So what he was doing is if you take the raw kale and you basically dry the kale, and what he was doing then was taking the dry kale, putting it in a bag, but he was taking the stalk off of the kale leaf and throwing that away. Well, he discovered that what he could do is to take that raw stalk and convert it into dog food. So now what he has is Brad's Raw for Paws, 5 varieties of Brad's Raw for Paws. So he's now producing a new product line using what was waste material, or material that he was throwing away. So Brad's is innovating, he's changing, he's listening, he's adapting, and these are the various products that Brad is now selling. Again, he's changing, he's adapting. And this is what Brad has done very recently. Okay, so where is Brad now? Let's look at Brad's growth. He has 1 factory in Pennsylvania. He has 60 employees. Revenues in 2012 were $5.3 million. He's in 4,000 stores right now. And Brad has only been in business now for a couple of years. We project that Brad will double his revenues next year to $10.3 million and be in 28,000 stores. They say, of course, you know, investors always hear these stories. But he secured a deal with the largest natural organic foods distributor. And they said, yes, he will achieve 28,000 stores next year. So investors love to hear that. We're excited about Brad's future. So let's summarize. The typical situations that require change are as follows. The dog doesn't eat the dog food. Okay, these might require some product enhancements or altogether new products. Murdoch's Fast Lane, for example. Changes in the economy will promote or cause change. You might have to raise or lower prices in response to changes in the economy. We kind of blew the projections. This is what happens with many companies when they go into the investor and they say, I'm going to do 100,000 this year, but I'm going to do 10 million next year. You get the next year and the 10 million, and you've only done 50,000. So now you have to change something to rebuild investor confidence. There are changes in technology, migrating from print advertising to online advertising, as we did in the end-of-school situation. Changes in the regulatory environment, you know, ensuring that you're in compliance with the regulators. We have a lot of companies in my portfolio that are life science, that are regulated by FDA. And it's amazing the amount of change that these companies have to undergo to maintain compliance with the FDA. Bless you. Changes in the management suite or overall team to ensure high performance. You want to ensure that the folks that you have around that table that are helping you produce product and get product out the door are high performers. So occasionally you might have to tweak that and make some changes to affect or create a good team. Anticipating or responding to competitors. Obviously, when your competitors are out there producing product, you want to make sure that that your changes are responding to what the competitors are out there doing. You know, you're not operating in a vacuum. Okay. All right, so we've talked a little bit about, now I've been talking for how long? 15 minutes? Okay, you guys need to talk to me. I want this to be interactive. Okay, so we've talked about changes that the individual companies make. Equally important are changes in the ecosystem or changes in the institutions that support entrepreneurship. So here in this region, there's one institution that has been, somewhat biased, one institution that has been very significant in its ability to catalyze change in the entrepreneurial environment, and that is the Ben Franklin Technology Partners. You might recall that back in the early 80s, there was a severe U.S. recession. That recession didn't skip Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania was impacted by it as well. Back then, the policy wonks prescription for mitigating against the impact of a recession was to create programs that would have impacted the manufacturing sector. That would have been the easy solution and the solution that typically would be put into place. Governor Thornburg at the time, though, had a different idea. He said, I'm not going to impact manufacturing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to design a program that's going to focus instead on innovation and the knowledge economy. Well, that was heresy at the time. No one thought that that was the appropriate way to go. You know, stick with something that you know. Stick with manufacturing. But he said, no, I'm going to push this through. So he put it through the General Assembly, and lo and behold, the legislation is passed to create the Ben Franklin program. So today, 30 years later, the Ben Franklin Technology Program exists, obviously. It's an initiative of the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. And what has been created are 4 independent 501c corporations throughout the state of Pennsylvania, each one having a private sector board. And I'm in, obviously, one of these organizations in Southeastern Pennsylvania, the most dense part of the state. And we're here basically to invest in the transformation of the Pennsylvania economy through technology, innovation, and strategic partnership. And what we do at Ben Franklin is as follows. You can basically look at what we provide in three buckets. The bucket that is most popular, the one that folks know most about, is capital. We provide seed capital to technology companies here in the region. We also provide business support services to accompany that capital that we provide to the companies. In the knowledge bucket, we work with companies to accelerate the commercialization of their products and services, primarily by connecting them with universities and research organizations that can help them accelerate their innovation. So whatever their technology is, it could be a medical device, it could be a therapeutic. By connecting them with regional university resources, we're helping them to accelerate the commercialization of their technology. In the networks area, here we're working collaboratively with other partners in the region along a number of areas, capital, social, technology, and we can talk more about that offline. But all of what we do is focused around the entrepreneur, creating new companies, creating products, jobs, and wealth for the region. So, how are we impacting the ecosystem? We're catalyzing change in providing early stage capital in a gap that still exists. Any of you who are investors in the early stage space know that there's a real paucity of early stage money to support not only technology companies, any type of companies. So the change that we're impacting here is in the capital realm, and we're impacting the capital need at the earliest stages. When companies are looking to develop new prototypes, money is really tough to identify at that point. So we're playing in that space. So we're making seed and early stage investments up to $750,000. We're selectively investing in regional venture funds. There are venture funds in the region that are doing larger deals than we typically do and are focusing on somewhat the early stage. So we're providing some funding to those funds. Most importantly, we're providing hands-on business development and management assistance to accompany the funding that we're providing. We're putting out approximately $6 million each year in 25 companies. All of those investments are co-investments, which means that for every dollar that we're investing, we're requiring investment from another source. Usually those dollars are coming from either the entrepreneur himself or herself or from an angel investment. And the current portfolio, again, is approximately 120 companies, which again is just kind of a daunting number of companies. But we provide one-on-one services to each one of those companies through my staff and consultants that we bring in. Between the 2001 and 2013, we've committed a little over $65 million to almost $500,000 early stage companies. And by providing that level of funding, our companies have been able to leverage that and raise a little over $1 billion in follow-on investment. Okay, again, this is just a graphic that shows the activity of our investment. We're a fairly significant player in the region here in terms of early stage investing, and actually national. Okay, you guys still awake? Still awake? Okay. What other change have we catalyzed through Ben Franklin? This is one of the changes that I've been somewhat involved with and proud of. 10 years ago, when I took over responsibility for managing this portfolio, the Ben Franklin portfolio, again, we've always had over 100 companies in the portfolio, had less than 5% minority participation. So out of 100 companies, I had one African American owned and led company. One. You heard me right, one. Even if I stretched the definition of minority and contort it in a number of ways, I could only get to 5%. Okay, even if I threw in women, I could only get to 5%. That to me was a problem. You know, we had to do something about that. But I found that the problem really wasn't unique to Ben Franklin. Milken had done a study and it had revealed that even after accounting for factors such as education, experience, industry, and location, minority firms received less capital and on less advantageous terms. So it wasn't a unique problem for us. If you look at the continuum of capital, this is something that some of you may have seen in the past. There are early stage companies that are just developing prototypes, usually can only access funds from, we call FFF, the friends, the families, and usually folks will say the fools. So you can access funding from that group. Sometimes this is related to some of the life science companies. You're able to get some federal funding through programs like the SBIR. And this new thing called accelerators. Sometimes accelerators are willing to throw a few bucks your way. Moving on, you have the private investor community, also known as angels. Organizations like Ben Franklin, and also some federal funds. Continuing to move down the continuum, you still have angels, Ben Franklin, you have the feds, but now you introduce some of your early venture capital funds that want to take on some early stage risk. And then you eventually migrate to the major venture capital funds and ultimately mezzanine. Well, what I found with the minority deals was a continuum that looked like this. If that looks really weird and distorted, well, yes it is. The friends and family source really wasn't much of a source at all. There were no angel funds or individual angels, at least organized, that were putting money in minority deals. Ben Franklin wasn't doing very much in that area either. Now, you see that the venture capital arrow is its regular shape. Well, that's because there's an industry of private equity investors that focus on minority-owned and led deals. These are private equity funds, some of which are billion-dollar funds that invest in minority-owned and led deals. The trade association for them is NAIC, National Association of Investment Companies. So I communicated with them, I reached out to them, and they said, look, Terry, if you can get deals up to the point at which we would invest, if you can bridge the gap between the friends and family and venture capital, then we can get more deals funded. So that meant that I had a job to do. I had to put together an angel group and ultimately perhaps an early venture capital group that could feed these deals to the larger venture capital groups. So what we did, I pulled together a focus group back in February of 2004 of individuals that I thought might have an interest in investing in minority-owned companies. And these companies we're not talking about barbershops and restaurants. We're talking about technology companies, because those are the companies that I could invest in at Ben Franklin. So I pulled together a group of friends who I knew were investors. And I said, would you be interested in putting together an organized angel group that would meet every month and vet deals? They said, yes, let's do it. It's to my surprise. So we had a big press launch and a reception in June of 2004, and we decided then to focus primarily on minority-owned or led technology companies as opposed to having a broader scope. We held our first meeting in November of 2004 and have been meeting, and we've received some funding support from Kaufman and State of Pennsylvania. And we've been meeting ever since. Every month we meet down at the Navy Yard. We hear two to three deals, and occasionally we might invest. So again, we're meeting monthly, actively investing. We are still the only organized angel network in the country that has a focus of investing in minority-owned or led companies. Again, the primary focus is on technology. There's the website. It's a diverse group. We have 16 men, 4 women, racially mixed, all kinds of professional profiles. Take a look at the website. Our portfolio now at Ben Franklin, which used to be 5%, is now 22% for Ray. I'd love it to be higher, but it's better than 5%. So we're now up to 22% with minority and so Ben Franklin has catalyzed change with respect to getting more minorities into entrepreneurship. So we're very, very proud of that. Where else are we catalyzing change? We're catalyzing change in publishing. The publisher of the Philadelphia Inquirer Daily News came to us a little over a year ago and said, look, folks aren't consuming their news with newspapers anymore. They're consuming it on their I gave my wife my smartphone. They're consuming it on their smartphones and other types of instruments. What can we do to get our news delivered through other mechanisms? So we said, let's get an incubator. Let's start an incubator. You know, we have the space here. Let's start an incubator. Try to raise some money from a foundation source, so that we can bring some companies in, digital media companies. This will give us an opportunity to look at various new technologies and perhaps start incorporating some of those technologies in what we do. So we did that. We approached the Knight Foundation. We secured some funding. And the incubator program was launched in January of last year. 6 companies came through the program. We have a third class that's underway now. And if you want an example of one of the companies that just came through successfully. Snip Snap. It's a coupon scanning application now in Android. So do try that. Okay, heard about this a little earlier. We're also catalyzing change and preparing tomorrow's entrepreneurs. We love this program. We really do. And our companies really find real value. And I'm not saying that because President Chop is here. We love these kids. They are so smart. Is Stan here? Stanley? Okay, Stan was actually worked at Ben Franklin, so he spent time with us. But the other students there, and I understand Julia graduated. I think she graduated. Are any of these young people here? Hi. Okay. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. How do you enjoy your time?
Essential Medical was great. People really taught me a lot. They really know what they're doing in the field of medical devices, and it was very exciting to be there.
Now, Chris, you did some really interesting, we were talking about this earlier, you really did some interesting things at Essential.
Yeah,
Why don't you tell the folks? Because
Oh, boy.
All right. In 25 words or less, because I think what he contributed to that company was really significant.
So, Essential Medical does vascular closure devices, which are used in endovascular surgeries, and as part of the product development team, I tested out several hundred prototypes. I built them by hand, added my own design features, and ran them through the design consultants and Dr. Rubin, who was an integral part of the team. And it was just it was very hands-on. It was very much very direct connection between the concept to the creation, to the prototyping, and to the marketability of it. So yeah, Central Medical, great company. If you can get an internship there, I'd say good for you. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. So this is something that we want to do year after year after year, because it's really providing the students an opportunity to get a real life exposure to companies, and the companies are realizing value. This isn't a one-sided affair. Companies are realizing value, and the students are realizing value. So again, we're doing that again this year. Okay. Somebody asked me, well, how does and I think this was in the article that was written in the Daily Gazette. What is Swarthmore's contribution to entrepreneurship in terms of the way entrepreneurs think? And I said my response to that question was something like this: the interdisciplinary approach to problem solving. I found that at Swarthmore, I was exposed to not only looking at something through the eyes of, if I'm a physicist, just looking at it through the eyes of physics, but looking at it perhaps through the eyes of music and art as well. When I came to Swarthmore in '69, I actually auditioned for the music department. I thought at that time that I really wanted to, I had studied classical organ for 6 or 7 years, and I really thought I wanted to be a music major. And I came out, and I took some music courses, and then I took some Romance language courses. And it was great that I didn't have to declare a major until my junior year, because I wanted to be a music major, then I wanted to go be a modern language major, political science. So by the time I got to my junior year, I claimed economics, and I'm glad I did. But I needed that time to kind of explore in a disciplinary way the different areas. And I think that's really relevant to entrepreneurship and problem solving, by having that interdisciplinary approach. The outside the box thinking. You know how Swatties are. I mean, we think outside the box. We're usually not in the box thinkers. At least I'm not. Now, having said that, you do need in the entrepreneurial suite folks that are inside the box thinkers. I want my accountant to be inside the box. Don't necessarily care that my engineering team is inside the box, or my designers are inside the box. Willingness to work hard. Swatties work really hard. I mean, we're used to working hard, so this is consistent with entrepreneurship. And what is a Swati but intellectually curious? I mean, we are intellectually curious, and I think that's really necessary of an entrepreneur to be curious in that way. And we all think we can change the world. And I don't want to invest in an entrepreneur unless he or she thinks that they can change the world. So that's the contribution I think Swarthmore makes to the world of entrepreneurship, because certainly it's what contributed to my makeup. Okay, I just want to conclude with a few things that I think are changes in the marketplace, the local marketplace at least. I'm really excited about what's happening in this region in terms of its support of entrepreneurship. The emergence of accelerators. These are programs designed to create new companies by immersing them in 12 to 14-week exercise, which is usually accompanied by extreme mentorship, and typically might end with a pitch day where the companies are coming in to pitch for investment. There's an accelerator in the Philadelphia area, some of you might be familiar with it, called Dream It. We invested in Dream It several years ago. Very proud of what they've been able to accomplish over the years. They've expanded their program to New York, to Austin, Texas, and even to Israel. There's a new excitement around incubators. We have and have had for many years here the Science Center in West Philadelphia. But now we have new names that are emerging. Organizations like Venture Force are coming along. So we're seeing new incubation projects that are coming around. Philadelphia is celebrating entrepreneurship, which I think is really neat. Philadelphia has never, in my memory, had a branding program that really celebrated young companies and celebrated entrepreneurship. They're branding a program called Startup PHL, which is promoting the city of Philadelphia as a great place to start a business. There's a new venture fund that was announced just last week. First Round, which is Josh Koppelman's venture capital fund, arguably the most active investor, early stage investor in the country, has moved his location from Conshohocken into the city of Philadelphia. That's very exciting. Philly Tech Week is coming up in April. This is an opportunity, I think, perhaps to get some Swarthmore young people engaged in some of the activities here. There's a student startup summit and plenty of workshops here, bootstrappers, breakfasts, and what have you. I would encourage all of you that have an interest and are local, including students, to take advantage of some of these activities that are happening during Philly Tech Week. And I think yes, this is, I believe, the last slide. Yes. Peter Drucker has a very interesting quote. Again, I've been collecting quotes on change. And he says, the entrepreneur always searches for change, responds to it, and exploits it as an opportunity. Out of the mouth of Peter Drucker. Thank you. Now, please talk to me. Yes.
Question: when you invest in startups, do you do it by way of a loan, by way of preferred stock, equity? How do you?
Typically, it's convertible debt with warrants. If I'm investing as part of a round, I'll take on whatever the structure of the round. We just did a deal last week, and it's basically a preferred stock round. So we'll take on that structure. But our typical structure is convertible debt with warrants. There's another hand here.
Yeah, they're focused on minority startups. Have the companies or people done work to define themselves and get credentials as minority enterprises, or do you help them with that? Or how does that work?
You mean 8A types of certifications?
Yeah.
We don't typically help them. We can refer them to consultants who do that. Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk offline about, if you have a particular situation, we can talk offline. Yes, sir.
Terry, you were talking about ecosystems earlier, and people talk about Silicon Valley having an ecosystem that's friendly because there's lots of say, tech engineers there, or perhaps that great diner after the half moon day where all the running gets done at 6
Yeah.
or 7:30 in the morning.
Yep, yep.
So where do we go to meet Josh Koppelman for breakfast? Where's the diner in Philly? What's the tech structure or ecosystem here? What's the inside place to be?
That's an interesting question. The diner used to be out on Route 30, as you know. I have been out there recently, and it's, yeah, I don't know that there's much going on out there anymore. There are some ecosystem deficiencies that still remain in this region. I think that the city of Philadelphia is taking an interesting position with the startup THL initiative, but certainly a lot more needs to be done. I still think there's a dearth of early stage capital in this market. Ben Franklin can only do what Ben Franklin can do. We put $6 million out every year in about 25 companies, and all of that has to be matched by. So that means $6 million is coming in to match it from some other source. But I still have difficulty getting life science deals done. If a company is looking to put a round of $10 million together to do some clinical testing on a therapeutic, I can't get $10 million in this market. That doesn't seem like a lot of money, but I just can't get it. So my companies are having to go outside the region. Last deal we did, I think the money came in from Chicago. Okay. But that's how far and wide I have to go, oftentimes, to get funding for certain types of deals when I get beyond the $5 million range. So we need a lot more early stage money in this region. So I'm being a little evasive because I don't know where that hot spot is. Some would argue it's going to be at Josh's place, but I don't know that that's going to be the end all be all. I'm not having coffee at Josh's place. Quiet as it's kept. Josh was Josh's first success, which was Empanautics. We funded. So Josh received investment for his first high flyer, which was Empanautics from Ben Franklin, and he didn't acknowledge that. Josh is a good friend.
Is there a relationship between publicly traded Franklin Resources and your organization?
No, not at all. Yeah. We are state funded, not a state agency, but we receive funding from the state.
Then a follow-up question: how do you compare to Pittsburgh, where Dick Thornburg originally came from, and efforts there versus what's been going on in Philadelphia?
Well,
and I'm sure there's some parallels and comparisons.
Yeah. The beauty of the Ben Franklin program is that instead of establishing 4 entities and having all the 4 entities mimic each other by having the same programs, it was designed to give us all the opportunity to design programs that were responsive to the needs of our particular market areas. So if I look at the Ben Franklin in Pittsburgh, which trades under a different name, they trade under Innovation Works, and that's a whole other story as to why they do that. But their programs will be slightly different than the programs here in Philadelphia, because my market is different than the Pittsburgh market. Now, we all invest money, we invest in young companies, but the stuff that I do with universities, matching universities and companies, they don't do that. So each of the dens has the flexibility to adapt their programming to the needs of the market, which is the beauty of the program. Yes?
Kurt, can you tell me about the role of technology in entrepreneurship? The 2 case studies, for example, the endless pool and snack foods, I would think of as technology.
Yeah, and most folks kind of scratch their head when they say we invested in Brad. Brad had a unique technology for drying the kale. And we don't know that we're going to patent it at this point, probably just trade secret. But how the manner in which he dries the kale is secret. Again, we probably won't patent it, but we'll just keep it as a trade secret. So that's the tech. That's the tech part of that. Endless pools was, I mean, that's tech. That's engineering. That's the design. That's where the tech connected is with that.
There's not a lot of times people think today technology is an app or the iPhone.
True.
IT.
True.
You have a much broader concept.
Yeah, I look at technology in three sectors. In fact, my team is built around three sectors. We have IT, which are the deals that come in, like a SnipSnap, which is an app, and the other software and telecommunications deal. There's another sector called life sciences, and these are the deals, these are the diagnostics, the therapeutics, the medical devices. And then I have a sector called physical sciences, which my director would hate me if I said this, it's everything else. It's the deals that don't fall neatly into IT and life sciences. And typically those would be deals involving advanced materials, robotics, sensors, radio frequency ID, alternative energy, typically falls in that bucket. And that's how we kind of view the world. So my team is, the person that runs the investment activity in life sciences has a background around life sciences, and similarly for the other two sectors. Yes?
Very insightful and helpful presentation, but can you reflect on investment that went south, that didn't work out, and what were the critical success factors for such failures that entrepreneurs can learn from?
Okay. A question around success and failure in the portfolio and the factors that contribute. As an investor in early stage companies, most of my deals are not successful, as quiet as it's kept. Now, when I say that, investing as we do in early stage companies, there are a number of metrics of success. Some are jobs created, which the state of Pennsylvania kind of measures some of our success by the number of jobs that our companies create, not necessarily the cash-on-cash return on investment. So in that way, most of our companies do create some metrics around jobs. But if you look at the investments that we make, and let me answer performance in this way. For the last 10 years, I've put out about 60% of all the dollars that I've invested over the last 10 years, I've received back in cash. Okay, now that's a different way of kind of looking at. It's an economic development metric as opposed to a cash-on-cash metric. I can give you the individual cash-on-cash returns for individual deals, but when you look at the portfolio, my portfolio performance I put up against some of the top decile funds in terms of the amount of cash that I've gotten back so far and the fair value of what still remains outstanding. Okay, and we can engage in that offline, but what happens is, if I look at all the deals I've done over the last 10 years, 60% of those dollars that I put out, I've already received back in cash. The fair value of what still remains out there is another 55%. So on a realized basis, I've got a 1.15, 1.2 times return.
But if you look at those entrepreneurs who failed,
yeah. What
do you think the root causes for their failures are?
Yeah. A number of factors. One is that they didn't have a sense of the market. They really didn't have a sense of customer taste. I think you take folks like Endless Pools. He had a sense of what the customer wanted. He went out. The first pool didn't work. The pricing was off. They liked the design, but the pricing was off. He could have said, okay, well, I'll play around with prices, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. But What he did, he went back to the drawing board and he made the necessary changes. So being responsive to what the market is telling you. I find that companies that don't listen to investors usually are a problem. And we have companies that fail to listen to their investors. A few Ben Franklin folks kind of know some of the ones I'm talking about. That's a real problem. And then you have some where the technology just isn't, just doesn't work. I mean, occasionally we'll run into situations where you have a company that's built on technology that ultimately doesn't work. Maybe it'll work for a period of time and then it fails for one reason or another. We also have companies that don't respond to competition well. You know, the product is good and it's going well, gangbusters for a while. Competition comes out, puts out another product, and they don't react quickly enough. So I could probably go on and give you 10 others, but those are the top of my head. Yes, sir.
I got a question that kind of fits a category in between that gentleman's question and what you've been discussing. Sometimes there's an entrepreneur that comes up with a concept you might fund alongside with many individual investors and what have you. And as the product is being introduced, there's change, just like the endless pool model, where it needs 2 or 3 different incarnations to get it right. And along the way, you know, as with most of these things, there's more money that needs to feed that sort of animal.
Right.
Now, not saying that it's a failure, but something that is actually heading in the right direction, that is evolving, needs second and tertiary rounds of funding. And if you're matching that along the way, we all recognize there's certain angel investors and individual investors that are going to get both time fatigue and capital fatigue. How do you handle it? Let's say you're in the 3rd round and the guy's getting it right for a change, or the 4th round, or the 5th round. But there is a point when you can see where it's going to hit. It's just that there's a degree of fatigue, especially in this difficult capital raising program. How do you respond to that situation? Not the failure, not the success, but the one that's taking longer and more capital intensive than you expected. How do you find new investment? And I just comment on that if you would.
Yeah, we see it all the time. And you know, oftentimes we will say, do we want to put in, you know, another 50, 100 to save our investment? You know, do we think this entrepreneur is up to, you know, taking those next several steps to really get this thing to market? And if we're convinced that he or she will, we'll go out and we'll try to pitch the other existing investors to see if we can get them as excited as we are in continuing to invest. And if we can't, and oftentimes we can't, because there is real investment fatigue, we'll go out and we'll try to sell that position to somebody new. Every once in a while you can get a new investor who hasn't heard the story before. You can bring them in.
Follow up on that. In many instances, that new investor will want to dilute the heck out of this situation.
Oh, sure.
To where the original entrepreneur,
Sure.
you have to price it right, otherwise he's out of it, no interest.
Yeah. You know, that's the other problem. If you're not going to pay to play, then you get diluted. Unfortunately, that's just the name of the game. Sure. Last money in is going to want to going to call the rules. 5 more minutes. Yes, sir.
So I think it might be helpful and instructive if you could talk about whether you actually have to insert yourself periodically to effect a management change. So there's a difference between a person who's had a brilliant idea, the energy and the drive to get started, and then a person who's necessary to take it to the next level, the Apple angel group, and the group person is necessary to take it to the capital. So do you get involved, talk about that change in the mindset, and do you get involved in accepting sort of suggested change in management?
Yeah, and that's very, very relevant. And we see it all the time. And the entrepreneur that we love is the one that acknowledges where he or she what the limitations are. And you're right. You know, we have the entrepreneurs that are the great visionaries that can come up with a product. But once they come up with a product, then they really need to step aside and let someone else come in and take that product to commercialization. And oftentimes we find entrepreneurs that recognize those boundaries and recognize those limitations. Where we don't, we have to work with the other investors. See, we don't take board seats. It's just a policy. We don't take board seats. So we are somewhat limited in the way that we can really cause them to, or make them move. But we work very closely with the other investors who do have board seats. And typically, they are in agreement with us. So obviously, if you're on board and the larger investor, you can affect those changes. But we see it all the time. Ideally, you rarely want to see that situation where you really need to force someone. Fortunately, in most cases, we've had situations where the entrepreneur kind of agrees, it's time for me to do the work.
Maybe sometimes you link the money, the additional amount of funding to some suggested change.
Exactly. Do we have time for one more?
Intellectual property?
Yes.
What are some of your policies and strategies for managing it?
We take a security position on IP, which is a little different than other venture capitalists and other lenders. When other lenders come in, they will take, if the company is fortunate enough to raise money from companies that are going to take a security interest, they'll take it in receivables, inventory, tangible kinds of assets. What we do is take a security interest only in the IP. That's the one thing that we take an interest in, and the only thing that we take an interest in. In terms of structuring IP, we don't stipulate to the company how to structure their IP. They have counsel, they have consultants that advise them on how to manage and structure their IP. We don't get involved in it. We can offer suggestions, but we can't compel them to manage it in a specific way. Yes?
So if most, as one would expect, of the ventures fail, and you have security interests in the IP, have you over this period of time acquired a portfolio of foreclosed IP? And if so, do you have a plan to monetize all of the IP that I would assume you would have acquired as a sort of residual of things that were tried and didn't pan out?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, in those situations where the companies don't work out, the IP usually isn't worth much of anything. We have had opportunities to actually realize on IP and have decided that if you weigh the legal cost against, it's just not worth it. Yeah.
I think we're